dependent on a philosophy statement of surrendering to one another's strengths and protecting one another's weaknesses. Well, if we put our roles aside, but put our strengths up front, then we reshape and redefine our roles, plus we know how to work with one another, help one another, and protect one another. And so it is a little muddy, and so we require people on these teams to be more secure and more self-assured and less territorial, and have a willingness that our goal is not to stick to whatever definitions the team comes up. This is just our suggestion to you. But you got to come up with your definitions, but the goal is how are we going to work together collaboratively to help this planner succeed. And so at any given time, we try to model as your regional team that it doesn't matter who has what title or job or whatever, who's the best person to do something at any given time.
So on a practical approach,
Yes.
let's say there's a planter. As a coach, you would not necessarily go to that person's hand and say, hey, you know, look, I know you're planting a church and I like to offer myself as a coach. But that's more of like a mentor. Would you say that's not a proper, I mean, I don't think you want to be too technical with that, but it is more like I'm trying to almost like create like a picture illustration, like a baseball player needing, he's on a slump, he can't hit the ball right. I need some private coaching, so to speak. When a manager sees that and says, you know, I need to hook you up with this coach here, and you need to go to private kind of confidential practice sessions or something. Is that the kind of picture we're seeing here, or?
Initially, and more often than not, we as catalysts function in that capacity. Right now,
as mentors.
Well, we function in the capacity of helping the planter get connected and see the value and the need of it. For example, there's one planter that's planting an additional church who did not have formalized coach, mentor, and supervisor. And part of the motivation was that I think you need this because you're having a hard time, and I'm not offering to be one of those three, I just think you need it. And then the other side of that was, and you need to know that someone that wants to partner with you is asking, where is your coach and your mentor and your supervisor? And so we kind of come in, again, in that apostolic capacity that we have no authority, you know, over our planters, but we have a bigger picture objective view, and we often take the initiative. Now, it does not preclude a coach or a mentor or someone who wants to be a supervisor from initiating, but more often than not, we work with the planter to get that planter to the point of asking for it. And then when the planter is not asking for it, then we get concerned. And we tell them, I'm concerned that you're not asking for the kind of help that we believe you need to succeed. And if you want to be a part of our system, if you want to have NAM funding, unfortunately funding becomes the inappropriate motivation too much of the time, but if you want to be a part of our network that has a proven track record of effectiveness and success, we think that you need this. So we try to stay engaged in conversation until the planter says, you know, I get it now, I think I do need it. And you need to be careful because you could have a supervisor that's not evangelistic. You could have a mentor that's not evangelistic. And so one of the things that Brian, who's gifted in evangelism, myself to a lesser degree, we both look at a planter and say, who is highly evangelistic that is on your team to encourage you to be evangelistic. Now, some guys are so evangelistic, we don't worry about that. But more often than not, today, we don't find that most of our planters are really high on personal evangelism. And so we look at it from that perspective. I kind of talked around your answer, but I think catalysts, we try to lead the planter there, and if they're resistant to that, then we figure out some way to help communicate that this is really for your good, it's not for our system.
Yeah, I think you answered more than my question. I think you just kind of gave me the actual, more real picture of how this process would take place almost in sequence in an ideal way. So
you need to know too that sometimes I have been the coach and now I'm the mentor, or I've been the mentor and coach, and you can move roles.
Yeah.
So, but you need to make sure you're specific about, now I'm operating, we're going to operate in this capacity. If you don't do that, then you can jumble it and not really get the benefit of what that is. So that would just be my other side comment.
turn the page.
Great.
I was talking to a guy recently who I've enlisted to do a project, and the guy's had a bad experience with other people, and he said, Ron, the answer is yes, but I'm going to keep my eye on you, because you promised to do some things, and I will only do this if you do what you promised. And I said, you can count on me to do this. He said, I understand, I'm going to keep my eye on you. I said, I'm okay with that, so long as your eye on me is not a fault-finding spirit, but it's going to be a helpful spirit. Everybody that's in the planter's life, our design, our intention is to be helpful, not to be fault-finding. Turn the page. We believe that our planters need to be what we're calling pioneering kinds of leaders, and just this second and last page has to do with some things that relate to giving you a heads up and let you see what we're looking for in you and what we're looking for in our planters, what we want to cultivate. And so let me just kind of read through some of this. Pioneering leaders challenge those that they lead to push beyond their comfort zones. Okay? They do this in a way that helps their followers envision a new way of doing things. This encourages people to take bold action. And so we want our planters to be pioneering, who will go beyond their comfort zone and look at a new way of doing things to take bold action. Second paragraph. Effective leaders are holistic, balanced, and stretch beyond their normal strengths. Tomorrow we're going to be doing the DISC, and we'll talk about it and a conflict process in August when we do part 2 of all of this. They're holistic, balanced, and stretched beyond their normal strengths. DISC discovered that poor leaders were gifted and disciplined in their natural 2 to 4 strengths. Poor leaders are good at 2 to 4 things. I see the whites of your eyes. Look up here for just a second. Poor leaders are really good at 2 to 4 things. Okay? Pioneering leaders were intentional about no less than 6 things, but typically 7 or 8 of the everything DISC leadership model. Some of the greatest failures that we've had by church planters here, the guys who are most evangelistic. The pastor in church that baptized the highest number of people in the entire Northwest Baptist Convention last year is now out of ministry. And while we are redemptive and we believe in a second chance over and over again, we'll do everything we can to encourage and help this guy in the future, it is unlikely that I would personally approve him as a new leader, because there's a pattern that has been going on for a long time. Most evangelistic church in the entire Northwest Convention. In terms of Gordon MacDonald, in his book, Ordering Your Private World, he talks about the better man often loses the race. Because in his 30s, he does it on looks and talent and favor and brains. And if he doesn't develop some disciplines and habits by his early 40s, somewhere in his mid to late 40s, he does something so dumb that now he's out of ministry. And it's ironic that Gordon MacDonald then did the same thing that he said he found out that others did. And so one of the things that we need to do as coaches is not look for something to pat him on the back and attaboy, just keep doing that, but we need to dig in a little deeper. You know, as Bob Record, I think it is, or maybe it was O.S. Hawkins, I can't remember, wrote the book about hidden faults. You know, the iceberg. You know, you see the 10% on top, but 90% on the water, and there are hidden faults there. You know, you got to be careful about all that. So we take a holistic, comprehensive view of the man of God, or the woman of God. And this is what the DISC Everything model has come up with. And you can Google it and find it yourself, that they have found that in terms of DISC, which can predict, you know, behavior, resolute, affirming, commanding, inclusive, pioneering, humble, energizing, and delivery. So if you're good at 2 to 4 of those, you're a poor leader in this model. If you're an effective pioneering leader, you're good at 6, but typically 7 or 8 of these things. It's a balanced approach, and you as a coach have unique ability to look into a person's heart in a gentle, safe, confidential relationship that's ongoing to come back and looking for things, like this. So in my coaching, I'm always coaching multiple people. I'm coach mentoring a D-Min student that I'm meeting with even this week. I don't look for their humility every time we meet, but I review this list and some other lists like it, I'll show you in just a moment, and say, I'm not looking for my version of humility, but I'm looking for evidence of biblical humility. And I'm reminded that what we call pride, the Bible says, is humility. The most humble man in the world was called prideful by his family, Moses. And Jesus was called prideful and a glutton and a wine abuser. So it's not about accusations, but can I see evidence over the long haul with regular relationships? Is this person all of these 8 things to some reasonable degree? And so that's just an example. There are examples for a holistic approach to helping planters. 3 examples from Christian history are John Newton, Charles Simeon, and William Wilberforce. If you don't know those names, someday grab a book or at least go online and read about these guys. And I like John Piper's description of these guys, that they were happy, healthy, and influential, with remarkable mental health, spiritual focus, and endurance. So it'd be great for you, to help you to read about these guys and to just be aware. Happy, healthy, and influential because of remarkable mental health, spiritual focus, and endurance. If I was to sum of it down, mental health, spiritual focus, and endurance, that's something that I'm looking for in those that I invest in and that I help. And then just the everything disc model validates that. Modern leadership approaches are consistent with this. We try to be well-read and studied and draw on other resources besides just what is the gospel. Because it takes more than being a nice guy and a gospel witness to be effective in ministry. Has always been true in my opinion. So in the last couple paragraphs, we are not defining the issues for you to coach on, but are showing you the importance of dealing with the whole person and their work from a proven and reliable perspective. And so the book that you have in front of you, Coaching 101, is an important book. It's a little simple in some ways. It's not as current as it once was, but it still is one of those good basic books. It's like there are certain books that are on my top 10 books for life, and there may be a better book than J.C. Ryle's book on holiness that comes out someday, but I'm always going to rely on Ryle's holiness to really go back and reread and understand holiness. This Coaching 101 book is that kind of a book that you can get more technical books, you get more team books. It's morphing, but it still has some pretty good things in it. Also, McCarty's The Supervision of Ministry Students is classic for understanding the 17 games that planters play with supervisors, coaches, mentors, and catalysts. He also lists 31 supervision issues, actually more than that now, and I've given that to you. It's vital that you as a coach see yourself as the key behind-the-scenes person of a cooperating team that not only helps the planter, but also accepts appropriate responsibility for the planter's behavior and thus long-term success. So we on this team are behind the planter, not drawing attention to ourselves, but to Christ and what Christ is doing in that plant. We are a collaborative, peaceful, cooperating member of the team. We're there to help. We accept appropriate responsibility. It's not, I asked you about this, you didn't do it, it's all your fault. But we need to find that balance of accepting appropriate responsibility for the planter's behavior, and how the planter behaves will determine whether or not he is successful. Take the excerpt that I had given you, and let me talk with you about that for just a little bit. In fact, before I do that, what questions do you have about what I've given you so far on that second page? What affirms, what's disagreeable, what's new? Any new thoughts or concepts on this?
I have a question.
Yeah.
A good leader has 7 to 8, six,
At least six.
at least 6 of these qualities. At what point, or how much of those 6 could be a strength that a leader has on his team instead of in pursuit?
I think that that's a really, really good question, and I don't know that I could give you more than an opinion about that. This model is based on the person. If you look at spiritual leadership, if you look at spiritual leadership and the way that I personally boil it boils down to oversight, teaching, and care. And if you take 1 Peter 5 and other similar texts that advocate an elder council model, and that it takes a team of people to properly pastor and lead the church of God, especially in difficult places, I build a strong case that the pastor is only good at 1 or 2 of those things: oversight, teaching, and care. And he should build his leadership team, staff, and elder council to complement his weaknesses, going back to the strengths and weaknesses thing. He doesn't have to be everything, but he has to make sure it all gets done. So from a leadership team model, totally agree that it's vital that the leadership team do this. Now from this DISC model, this is not looking at the team, although you can do a team assessment through DISC online, that this is looking at the person himself. And what we've seen in the past, we've seen some really dysfunctional, bad behaving leaders in the past build some great ministries. And they've been managed, and someone else has been doing damage control. I had someone at a top level at NAM said, "Ron, you're doing a good job keeping so-and-so out of jail." And I kind of laughed and said, "Yeah, that's exactly what I do." There are multiple people throughout the Southern Baptist Convention that I have kept out of jail, figuratively speaking, and there's some people literally. In fact, I still have some notes because someone I know from California someday is going to probably go to jail, and I'll probably be called in to testify. But yeah, I think that there still is that reasonable level of a person being healthy and holistic and competent and trustworthy. This lends to some of the culture changing stuff with us, that for some couples, they're so good as a couple, but you split that couple, they kind of fall apart, where they have learned to really, complement one another in an unusual way. It builds a strong case for couple ministry.
You just described my life in that perfect.
Wow, I'm glad you said this, I didn't have to. You'd be in trouble with that.
Yes, I would, and I know it full well.
So I think it's a good point, but from this information, this is talking about and presenting a model that the individual himself needs to have these characteristics. But it's not to say that it can't be complemented by a spouse that balances, or a primary team that is at the core of what they do.
Right.
Great insight. Other thoughts or questions? Yes.
I'm sorry, my English is not very well, but I hope you understand my question.
No problem.
All of these character for a leader
Yes.
is kind of from nature of us. We can improve a lot to be a good leader.
Yeah, this list comes from DISC, and we're going to give you the DISC tonight, and you'll take the test, and then we'll unpack it and teach on it tomorrow. So it'll become more clear tomorrow what this list is about, where it comes from. And the DISC is a recognized universal tool to identify the personhood traits and characteristics of people who are, you know, successful and not. And so this is kind of a psychosocial model to a degree, looking at behavior and management kinds of things.